behind the whole thing. That's a hard God for people to serve nowadays. But anyway, I'm going to tell you what, I struggled a whole lot with what to say, because I don't just want to get up here and take an hour's time up and you guys go out here and say, well, nice message. I'd like it to be something from the Lord that would benefit you. And there's certain things I couldn't get off my heart. So I wanted to tell you that this is mainly food for thought. Now, there'll be a few of these things in here that's just sort of what I've come across and what I've studied and seen, and I'm just wanting to submit it to you, and you can tell me what you think. I'm open for feedback or correction or anything like that. After all, we don't have a whole bunch of outsiders here to impress. I don't think we got to worry about running nobody off or anything, do we? So I'm going to share a few of my thoughts with you this morning, and perhaps my experience, which is no deeper than the next man. In fact, it's kind of shallow, but maybe it will help encourage you along just a little bit. Years ago, I had in my library, I don't have it anymore, I had a book. And the title of that book, and it depends on whether you live in the city or whether you live in the country, how you pronounce this word. How many of y'all say he had to run the route this morning? I mean, y'all, or how about, does some of you say he's out on the route this morning? You know, country people say route. City people say route. You know, one guy asked me over at the bus lot, are you going to run the same route this year? Well, I'm going to run the same route. But anyway, there's a book, and the title of it, I read this, used to have it in my, you know, it was called En Route or En Route to Global Occupation. And that stirred my interest because it's common teaching just about everywhere that before Jesus comes, the world will enter into a one-world government, if our understanding be correct, a beastly government system headed up by one great, smart political man, and as his sidekick, if I can use that term, a great spiritual leader. And there's all kinds of teachings about that. I don't even want to even begin to get into it, but that's commonly taught. And so that book got my attention, because if that be true, and if we can see these things being formed, then we can safely assure the coming of the Lord is drawing near. And I don't know about you, but I long for it. I yearn for it. I can sit here and count the number of people, and some just this week that I visited with, that broke down while I was visiting and cried and said, I am so tired of the horrible things, and their family doing all kinds of stuff, and that which I can relate to, and hearts broken and lives just ripped apart, and grandkids are doing stuff, all that. And they said, I just want the Lord to come. And so to me, I don't know how you would feel, but to me, if you see something in the making that is something predicted by the Bible that signifies we are nearing the end, that should cause our hearts to rejoice. Unless you are attached to this world and its system, and you are like Lot's wife, which Jesus said, remember Lot's wife. Because she turned around and looked, was it that sight was too much? I've got my own personal feeling about that, and it's because her heart was back there. The bridge club that she gathered, the sewing and the ladies and her prominent place in society and her material blessings and all of that, her career, all of these things were back there, and they were going up in smoke, and it really made her sad. Where a godly person ought to be thankful to God that He stepped in and put an end to all of that terrible stuff that's going on and delivering you from it. So I read this book. I found out that the author of this book used to work for the government. He worked as what they call a liaison. Do you know what that is, Brother Tom?
Yeah, a go-between.
Okay, that's sort of what he was. He set up Mideast trade deals. Well, while he's working and rubbing shoulders with high uppers, he said it shocked his system that he saw certain things and made certain discoveries that there are people in high places and government officials even, and they're working toward establishing a one world government. Now, and I'm taking a little time, but I'll try to get through this. But for example, years back, we had a country that got out of line. Hitler did. Other countries joined in together as allies and put a stop to that mess. One country corrupts. Saddam Hussein, he invaded Kuwait, and us and some allies stepped in and said, "Oh, no, you don't." Well, what happens when the whole world is under a government and it goes corrupt and it's anti-God? There's nobody else to step in, and it's a thing called checks and balances. There's nobody to step in. So if we understand the Bible, and if you're not sure, then you ought to take it upon yourself to bury your nose in that book and ask God to help you, because we need to know these things. Because if we are there and we're not aware of it, then we're in the dark, and these things can overtake you and you be caught unaware, and that's not good. Is everyone following me? Now, this man that wrote this book, through a chain of events, I didn't necessarily plan it to happen, but I got talking to him on the phone in his office, and I set up a meeting. He was coming through to a place in Arkansas, and he said, "I'll stop and talk at your church or your group if you will just get me a motel room for the night." I said, "Done. And we'll take up an offering, whatever we can get. I don't know what it'll be, $1 million or 25, but we'll take." He said, "Don't worry about that." I said, "Can I sell my books?" I set your books up and sell them. Well, what happened before, I got a man who was a printer, and he printed up a very impressive handbill. One world government coming, Revelation and all like that, and coming here, this speaker. I chose a neutral spot. I rented a all-purpose, what do you call that, family center that people have in churches and all that, fellowship hall and all that. And I got it from the First Church of God because I found out this man's background was that. And so I done that. We advertised it. I sent out letters along with videotapes of it to all the churches in the area. This man is coming with some first-hand knowledge of what's going on in the government, and it lines up with our understanding of last-day events. So I said, I was not attempting to be in the limelight or take the credit for it. I just wanted to educate the people of God, and I thought churches could come together and all like that. Then, after talking with him what to do, they sent me a cassette tape. It was we didn't have all this other stuff yet. It was cassette tapes. We'd graduated from the old reel to cassettes. And he done an interview with one guy, and the guy asked him questions, and he answered him. Well, I got in the recording room there, this radio place where I had over in Kentucky where I had a program, and I mimicked those questions. "Gary, it's good to have you here with us today, and we're wondering just what is your plan?" And I'd click and I'd play. "Well, the so-and-so," and he'd answer me. And I told the people before that, he was on there by way of recording. And I played that. And there was people that called and asked, "Where's this?" When all was said and done, no churches showed up. This man had appeared on Concerned Women of America with Beverly LaHaye. He was an internationally known speaker. He appears to this day, if you know anything about Jan Markell and all them. I mean, he's appeared on some of the biggest. And here he was here with this ton of information. And we had about 40 people showed up, and they were just a few renegades like me. The rest of the pastors and other churches showed up. So anyway, I got to talk with him, and I got to pick his mind with some stuff. And what is going on, folks, whether it be the Bible being fulfilled or not, there are people in high places, and they are Luciferians. They actively engage in the worship of Lucifer. They have it in their mind that God is the bad guy and Lucifer's the good. Are there people, powerful people, rich beyond any words you can imagine? Money is not even an object to them. They own so much and control so many banks and world banks and all, it's not funny. And they worship Satan. They look out upon the condition of the planet, and they see the planet that we're killing ourselves, so they have to implement certain plans in order to stop it, and they're out to save the planet because they don't believe nothing. It's just a bunch of foolishness. Nobody gonna, if our problems are to be solved, man must solve his own problems. And that is their philosophy. Now, unfortunately, many other people are entangled in this movement, and their minds are being swayed to thinking that way, and they're naive. They're not necessarily worshiping Satan. They just think this is a better idea. This is not a slur. It's not a hateful remark, but you and I know even many churches don't even hold to what the Bible teaches. It's no longer regarded as the infallible Word of God. That's right. It's a religious book, and you may get some good out of it, and they're convinced we've got to put a stop to some things and implement certain rules and all like that to save the planet. The only problem about that, folks, is that most of their policies are anti-God. They are against everything that you hold precious and true, and they want to stop your way of life and convince a whole generation that this thing of Christianity is foolishness, unless you don't want to get real serious about it. You can just accept that as another God. You know, like Brother Tom, I've listened to your videos, just another way to the Father. Another way, it is a truth, but not the. I talked to a man last week, and he said, well, that's your truth, and this is my truth. We all have our truth. If I told you that this is water, and you said, no, it's not, it's alcohol, one of us is wrong. And if I told you that that's ginger ale, and you said, no, it's beer, and it's really water, then both of us was wrong. How in the world can you have your truth and me have mine and us both be right? So anyway, this is going, and they have made great advancements. They have an agenda. And one of the things is to not necessarily stand up and tell everybody out here, we're wanting to do this one world government, and we're going to try to get you to disbelieve in God. No, they want to sway people's minds into believing that mom and dad's way of thinking was just nuts. Just wrong. It's ridiculous. In fact, you're a lot more intelligent than they are. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but I've seen that in my own grandkids and my own family. I'm stupid because I got enough sense when it's raining to get out of the rain or I'll get wet. Well, they can go into some big, long explanation now. Let me explain, silly papa. And when they get done, I sit there and think, really? You've really got to be serious. And so these folks are brainwashing. If you don't think they've not made great strides in progress, just look at some of these insane people that get on, and some of them in political office, that can get up and say some of the most stupidest things you ever heard. So that agenda is in place. Men are striving for it. Now, I don't mean to get political on you, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know whether you be a God or a devil, but the election of Donald Trump put a halt on it. It put the skids to it. Now, we have to ask ourselves why, or I do. Well, could it be that he's going to turn it around? I don't know about that. I'd like to see that, this country be, I'd like that, but I don't have a promise of that. Or could it be to give me more time? Time for what? Time to talk to my loved ones. Time to preach another gospel. Time to get myself in God's Word and get robed up and get ready to leave. Folks, I live by that every day. I live by it. Now, with that in mind, have I bored you to death, or is it okay if we now go into a few scriptures? Silence is consent. Who laughed? Erica, was that funny? I'm glad I got it. In Revelation chapter 1, and let me tell you something right now. I do not have a full understanding of this book. I'm not going to tell you I've been seeking God so much and He's just enlightened me and now I know. I don't. But I pondered over this book a great deal because you're promised a blessing if you hear and read the words and keep it as the prophecy of this book, and it's shrouded in symbolism, and there's still much controversy over it today. Real fast, if you've got chapter 1, first off, what is the name of this book? Someone tell me what you see. It's called The Revelation of what? Of Jesus Christ. In some of the older Bibles, it says the revelation of St. John the Divine. Number one, John, as the great apostles he was, he's no more divine than I am. Number two, this is not about John. This is a revelation. Now, do you know what a revelation is? Let me explain to you. Boy, I don't have... You know this is a song, but let's say you don't know what this is. And I got this covered. I got something under here, but you can't see it because I got it covered up. You don't know what this is, and you're looking strange, squint, look, ponder, get sideways, angle it, can't tell. Why? Because it's covered up. But when I say get ready, I'm going to give you a revelation of what this is. I'm going to reveal it, means I'm going to take the covering off there and you can see it. This is not a concealment of truth. This is a revealing of truth. And who was truth? Truth is not some set of rules. Truth is the Lord Jesus Christ. The Word of God made flesh and dwelt among us. Now this is a revealing of Him. The first verse there says the revelation of what? Jesus Christ, the revealing, the taking the cover off, putting Him in open view, which God gave unto Him to show unto His servants things which must what? Shortly come to pass, and He sent it and signified it by His angel unto His servant John. I'm going to stop reading right there. We cannot go into all of this, but I want to point your attention to just a couple of things. He says this is a revelation. God gave it to Christ to show unto His servants things that must shortly. So in other words, I can't get anything but this. Show me if I'm wrong. He said, I'm going to show you things that's going to happen here before long. So from whenever this was written, there's scholars that argue for an early writing date, and they're mostly preterists. They got to have an early date to support their teaching. I don't buy it. There is evidence to the contrary, I might say. But regardless of if it was written in 67 AD or 90 AD, when it was written, from whatever time it was written, the things described here are future tense. They haven't transpired yet. They haven't happened yet. Now, I'm going to give you just a little bit of class on this, and I hope it won't bore you. But he said, things which must shortly come to pass. What have I done with my little notes that I had? Oh, my. The preterist group used this and says, see, it says shortly, so these things happened pretty quick after this was, Well, okay, good argument, but let's, I tell you what I do, rather than just take some man telling me it means such and such. And they always said, let's let the Bible interpret the Bible. Okay, I will do that. Let's do that. Because I'm not out to prove some point. I'm out to conform to the truth of God's Word. Though it costs me everything, I'm out to conform to it. If I'm something wrong here, I'm ready to make the adjustment. And for something right over here, I'm ready to fall into, and if it means my family hates me and thinks I'm nuts and leaves me, that's hard, it's difficult, but it won't be the first time it's cost me a loved one. So anyway, I took a look at this word shortly, and I thought the best place to find what shortly means is look in the Bible where it's used a few other times. Now, I need a little help. Thank you, Ben, that you'll help me. In Deuteronomy 4, I believe if you want to go home and study this, Moses was speaking to the children of Israel, and he was telling them what's going to happen to them in the latter days and all like that if you guys abandon this covenant and if you don't do what it said. Have you got that, Ben? Deuteronomy 4?
Yeah, what verse?
I want verse 25 to 27.
Okay.
All right, read that, please.
When thou shalt beget children and children's children, and ye shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, to make a graven image, or the likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of the Lord thy God, to provoke him to anger. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that ye shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto ye go over Jordan to possess it. Ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you.
All right. Now he was telling them, you do this and I'm going to scatter you into all the world. And what was that verse 26 said? 26? Kind of read that slow again there.
I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that ye shall soon...
You what now? You shall soon perish off of the land. And it didn't happen for hundreds and hundreds of years later. So do we... all of a sudden are we going to see that shortly and soon and all of that don't necessarily mean... You see, if Brother Tom called me and said, listen, I'm coming to see you pretty soon, I might look for him in the next 30 minutes, but he might have meant it's going to be 2 or 3 months down the road, or 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
See, I don't know why the Bible words it that way. Now, for another one, go right on over to Deuteronomy 32. Again, if you want to go back and read it's a song of Moses, and he's telling them how that they didn't have, verse 20 says, your children in whom is no faith, and he's telling them what's going to happen to them if they don't do what's right, and if they falter away and all like that. And he's telling them of their destruction that will come. And look at verse 35. Deuteronomy 32:35. He says, to me, I'll read this, to me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time. For the day of their calamity, what? Is at hand. And the things that shall come upon them make haste. Folks, that didn't happen a week later. It didn't happen 2 or 3 years later. And he said it's right at hand.
That's right.
So you see, that argument begins to crumble. Now, I have got a whole list of passages like that. I'm going to read a couple more to you. Psalm 68:31. Well, if I can find it. I hate to have Ben do all that reading. I'm afraid he'll quit coming and playing music with me if I make him read too much. Psalm 68:31. This is a prophecy of the glory of God here and look at what it says, the princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall do what? Soon stretch out her hands unto God. Guys, I don't know of any big revival striking Ethiopia back in them days when David was there and all of them turning to God. But he said they're going to do it real soon. Do we see that? Now, Ben, get me Isaiah 29:17. I do this because Ben reads a whole lot. And don't you ever think that you getting up here reading these scriptures is not important. You've done that for years. Don't get weary in well-doing. Don't let it bore you. Get right up here. You're doing that for the Lord.
29:17.
Please read it.
Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall shall be esteemed as a forest.
All right, if you go to reading that, if I understand it right, this is a prophecy of coming times when God's really going to bless, or the day of the Lord or something. I may be getting my scriptures fouled up here, but it's of a future time, and he says a very little while. Lebanon's just going to blossom out and be blessed. Kind of like millennial blessings to me. And then 51 and verse 5.
My righteousness is near, my salvation is gone forth, and my arm shall judge the people. The idle shall wait upon me, and upon my arm shall they trust.
All right, one more. Joel 3:14. Daniel, Hosea, Joel. I know we're just easing along here, but
multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision.
multitudes in the valley of decision. The day of the Lord is near. Well, I realize that sometimes his judgment struck back then, and that was the day of the Lord to some people. But these are prophecies concerning the judgment of nations. And even if it was something that happened back then, it didn't happen a year later after Joel uttered this. There was many years that passed by. I've got a whole list of scriptures like that, where God says that such and such is near. I got one over in Haggai, where he said that the prophecy of Jesus, and he said, I'd have to turn it up to read it exactly, but he was saying that his coming was really close, and I think that was 500 or 600 years later. Wasn't real close to where I'm coming from. I don't know about you, but 500 or 600 years is not a real close. So this thing of the day, that these are things that must just shortly, real quick here come to pass, does not mean that it's going to take place here in a week or two. It means that when it does happen, it's going to take off and do it. It won't waste. That's one way of looking at it. Another one is this. When judgment was pronounced on a people, when Jesus wept over Jerusalem and he said they're going to surround this place and it's going to be horrible. And if you've ever read the history of it, it was unbelievable, the suffering. 40 years went by before that happened. People just went on with life. Maybe some of them even remembered that prophecy. I'm glad he missed that one, that false prophet. And for some people that maybe believed in it, they wondered, would it ever come? But when it did come, it was too soon for those that experienced it. People that are destined for hell, they might feel like right now and they might live to be 95 years old. Man, that's a long time. But I'm going to tell you, when they arrive, it'll be way too soon, I promise you. I can remember, just like it was a day or two ago, I was talking to Lisa. I said, the 10th of this month, Mom had been dead for 20 years. 20 years. It's like that. Happens quick. I didn't think I'd ever get to be an old man. Well, I'm getting that way. And my body, I've been doing push-ups and stuff like that, and I was so stoved up yesterday I couldn't hardly walk. Now, back to this little revelation here. I want to know something. Is this boring everyone to death?
No, sir.
All right. Now, the next thing that happened, John hears a voice. He talks about Jesus coming. He lets us know what this is about. He's addressing 7 churches in Asia. Now, I would have to ask anybody this. Why these 7 churches? There were other churches in the area. I've looked on the map. There were other churches in close proximity to these. There were believers scattered out all around there. Why didn't he address them? Why did he single out these 7? Do you think they were the only ones having problems? You think they were the only ones with a spiritual deficiency? I don't think so. How do I know? Because the Apostle Paul addressed some of those bodies that are not addressed here, and they had terrible problems in them. Corinth had a guy, how would you word it in a nice way? He was married with his stepmom, or supposed to be, or something. They were having the Lord's Supper and getting drunk as Cooter Brown, whoever that is. Galatians were turning back to the laws and depending on the law to justify them. Nothing wrong with honoring your mother and father, but if you're doing that thinking that'll save you, you're going to die lost. Now, so there were other churches, but he singles out these 7 because they're typical of something. Let that sink in. Then he speaks, and Jesus appears to him, and in verse 19, Jesus had told him there in verse 17, I'm the first and the last, I'm he that was alive, dead, and I'm alive forevermore. I have the keys of hell and of death. You ever heard somebody say he's got the keys of death, hell, and the grave? Doesn't say that. It says he's got the keys of hell and of death. Then he says, write the things which you've seen. That's this stuff here in chapter 1 where the Lord appeared to him. Write what you've seen. He said, then write the things which are. That's these 7 churches that exist right now that typify something. Because keep in mind, I'm not going to read it, but according to verse 3, this book is a prophecy. Verse 3 states it, says, blessed is he that reads the prophecy of this book. It's a prophecy. So these are not just 7 churches that he picked on, or they thought, well, I think you could get a good lesson from these. These are prophetic and symbolic and representing something. Now, and if the last one don't represent where we're at, I don't know what does. He said the things which are these 7 churches. And then he says, the things which be hereafter. These are future tense things, okay? Look at chapter 4 and verse 1. After this, after the 7 churches had been addressed, he said, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were a trumpet talking with me and said, come up hither. Come up here, in other words. And I will show you things which must be when? Hereafter. Mine's got a little note out the side that says in the future. Does any of y'all have a center reference or anything that says something on that word hereafter? Okay, we'll go look it up when you get home. It means I'm going to show you things that's going to happen in the future. So what takes place from here on out, he sees it in heaven, in vision form, unfolding before him. And these are things that are future tense from the time John writes this. There's nothing here that happened back before Jesus was born or about the time or during his ministry or whatever. These guys, I've heard them tell me all this is the destruction of Jerusalem. If you can read that and get the destruction of Jerusalem from it, you're a better person than I am. I don't get that at all. Now, he says these things are going to be future tense, and then he